Welcome to the Mindset of Podcasting. I'm Jillian, and on this podcast, we talk about all things business, mindset, and podcasting. Podcasting is a great way to grow your business and allows you to be seen as an expert in your field. In each episode, I will be talking to an expert in a different area of business so that we can get all the tips to help grow your own business and podcast. So listen in. Welcome back to season 2 of the Mindset Podcasting. I'm so glad to be back. This season is going to look a little different from last season. So I put out at the end of May a request for a guest on my podcast for season 2 because I wanted to record in June so that I can enjoy the summer with my kids since they would be off of school. And it's a little hard to record with kids because they're very loud. So I got a ton of people who wanted to be guests on this podcast, which I am so grateful for because there were so many and because I was so excited to chat with them because I love networking. I love meeting new people. I love learning from new people that I decided season 2 is going to be all guest episodes. Now, this is going to be the only solo episode for this season, but at the end of every episode where there is a guest for season 2, I am going to pipe in at the end and I am going to let you know my takeaways from the talk with the guest. I'm going to let you know my podcast tip of the week and give you some updates on things that are going on. So you are still going to get me at the end of every episode, giving you your podcast tips and things like that. And I'll be polling the listeners to see what they want to learn so that I can gear the tips towards what you want to hear. So you will still get me at the end of every episode, but these guests have so much value to give and so much to talk about that I couldn't say no to a lot of them. So I'm very excited for this upcoming season. So I hope that you are too, and you will continue to listen. So today we are going to talk about things to consider before starting a podcast. So I don't think starting a podcast is right for everybody. Just like with everything else, it's not right for every single person. There are things that you have to consider before starting your podcast. And I wanted to let you know some of those things to consider so that you can take them in mind if you are thinking of starting a podcast. So number 1 is that you need to be consistent. You can't just record an episode whenever you feel like it and put it out whenever you feel like it. Your audience needs to know when they can tune in and that you will be there every time. So whether you release an episode weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever it is, you need to release it the day that you say that you're going to. Your listeners need to know that they can trust you to be there when you say you're going to be there, basically. So make sure that you have the time in your schedule. Now, a little later on in the episode, I am going to give you some tips on being consistent and some tips on just avoiding burnout and that make your podcast a lot easier for you. So stay tuned in a little bit and I will be giving those tips. But the second thing you need to consider before starting a podcast is you do need some equipment and it is going to cost you some money. But it does not have to be super pricey. You don't have to get super fancy in the beginning. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm using a microphone that cost me $40. $40 on Amazon, and it works just fine. Go on Amazon, read the reviews before you purchase because you want to make sure that you're getting something that will actually work for you. But go on Amazon, type in podcast microphone and find one that works for your budget. I just ask that you don't use your computer audio because it is kind of echoey. So you are going to need a microphone. And if you do have guests, I suggest that you have headphones because your microphone could pick up when the other person is talking. It's called feedback and it will sound kind of echoey on your end. So make sure you have a pair of headphones. Again, nothing fancy. Just make sure you have some headphones in. That's really all the equipment that you need to start with. So it's not going to be super pricey, but you are going to have to put a little bit of money into it, especially for the microphone. 3, you will not make money right away from your podcast. I think a lot of people think that if they start a podcast, they're going to get like ads and sponsors and it's going to bring money in. It takes a while, just like with anything else. You know, the influencers that you see on Instagram, they didn't go on Instagram day 1 and start making a ton of money as an influencer. So you have to be consistent And you have to show up when you say that you're going to show up. You have to keep going. It's going to take a while to grow to get the number of downloads that you need to have ads or sponsors. This doesn't mean that you can't use your podcast as a marketing tool to lead to your products, services, or courses. So make sure you're talking about them in every episode too. That's the number one way that you're going to make money to begin with your podcast, is leading them to work with you. And number 4, which I kind of just said, I just realized I wasn't looking at my notes, but the main purpose to begin with your podcast is to lead your listeners to your offers, which I did just say. So make sure you have a call to action at the end of every episode. We're going to start with using it as a marketing tool. And then as your podcast grows, you can look at ways to add ads and sponsors and start to monetize it. So I promised you some tips so that you don't get burned out with your podcast and you can be successful and be consistent. I'm going to tell you the number one thing that will help you stay consistent is to batch record. Batch record. Pick a day. Doesn't matter what day you pick. Pick a day and record all your episodes for that month or for the next month, whatever it is. Record as many episodes as you want. I have a client who did 15 episodes in one day. Now, personally, I could not do 15 episodes in one day. That would be too much. But for her, she liked to know that she had like 3 months worth of episodes done and that she doesn't have to record again for 3 months. I have another client who records every 2 weeks. She records 2 episodes every 2 weeks, and that works best for her. So decide what works best for you. If it's once a month, every 2 weeks. That way you can be ahead of the game. Make sure that you're always ahead. You don't want to be recording the episode that's going out next week on Friday of the week before. Like, that's just going to stress you out. So put it in your calendar. Record podcast, and make sure that you stick to it. Another little trick that you can do is record some ads for your own services or products. Don't just say it at the end, but record some ads. Make it fun. You know how if you listen to bigger podcasts, they have those ads in the middle. Usually they're for BetterHelp. Like, I think that's like the number 1 ad right now. But they record ads for these products in the middle of the podcast. Do it for your own products. If you listen to this podcast, you can obviously hear them. In the middle of my guest, I have ads for my affiliate links. And then towards the end, my outro is an ad for my services. So have fun and record some ads for your own stuff. Add music, make it fun. If you're still feeling overwhelmed of where to get started with this podcast, I do have a free podcast launch guide that you can go download. The link is in my show notes, or just go to the mindsetofpodcasting.com and you see on the right-hand side, it says free podcast launch guide. Sign up, get that free guide that will help you feel a little better about how to start and where to go when starting your podcast. So sometimes it's not always the right time for you to start a podcast. So I wanted to make sure that you knew what to consider when starting one. So I hope you take all these things into consideration, and I hope that they help. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. I am on Instagram. I am in my emails. All the links will be in the show notes. Reach out to me and ask away. I'd be happy to help answer any questions that you have. If we need to hop on a call, we can do that, and I can help you decide if starting a podcast is right for you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so excited about this season and all the amazing guests that you are going to hear. So make sure you tune in next week. So I wanted to give you a little update. I am launching a new program that will help you launch your own podcast all by yourself. And I wanted to let you know all about it because I love my podcast listeners. And I know that some of you are thinking about starting your own podcast. Obviously, that's why you listen to this episode. So here is a little something I recorded to tell you all about the program. Are you ready to start your podcast, but you don't even know where to begin? You need help getting the right equipment, setting up the tech, and managing all the things that come with having your own podcast. Well, the Podcast Launch Solution is your answer. The Podcast Launch Solution is an 8-module self-paced course that walks you through every step of starting your podcast, every single step. So who is the Podcast Launch Solution for? It is for anyone who has a message they want to get out to the world. You have always wanted to start a podcast, but you felt lost on where to even begin. You want someone to walk you through step by step of how to start a podcast. And you also have some mindset issues that go with starting something new. And this program handles those too. So what do you get with the Podcast Launch Solution? In Module 1, we're going to go over the basics. We're going to start with the fears of starting a podcast and how to overcome them. Then we're going to dive into your podcast name, topic, cover art, description, and setting up your podcast host. Module 2 is the roadmap to sounding good. We talk all things equipment, your recording space, how to actually record so that you can feel confident with your voice. And we also discuss getting out of your own head with how you think your voice sounds. Module 3 is all about creating your episodes. In this module, we talk about your intro, outro, music, and all the details about your first episodes. Module 4 is all about editing your episodes. Okay, so this is where people usually get nervous. And one of the biggest reasons they think that they can't have a podcast is because they don't know how to edit. So we're going to talk about if you even need to edit your podcast, why editing isn't so scary, and then I will walk you through an editing tutorial with step-by-step instructions on how to edit your intro, outro, music, and your episodes. Module 5 is called Release. When you get to this module, you are almost ready to release your podcast out into the world. We discuss letting go of perfectionism and just releasing your podcast. And we also talk about the technical side of putting your podcast on all the podcast players. Module 6 is about sustainability. You want your podcast to grow, and in order to do that, sustainability is important. We talk about creating a schedule for your podcast, managing your guests, and serving your listeners. Module 7 is optimization. Eventually, we want our podcast to bring in money, but it does take a while. So in this module, you're going to learn how to promote your podcast, how to make money when you first start your podcast, and all about your podcast website. Module 8 is a bonus module, and this is where you learn how to analyze your analytics, audit your podcast, and when to know if it's the right time to have someone take over managing your podcast. There's also a private Facebook group for the program that I will be in every day answering your questions so that you never feel alone in this program. If you are ready to start your podcast, then go to the link in the show notes. This program will open on September 12th, 2022. When you join the waitlist, you will get access to my podcast launch guide and monthly newsletter. Plus, you'll be the first to know when the program opens, and you also get a discount. So click that button and get on the waitlist, and you could have a podcast by the end of the year. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Your support means the world to me. Do you want to create a podcast on your own, but you're not sure where to start? My free podcast launch guide will give you all the information you need to start your podcast. From timelines to equipment, I got you covered. Head over to themindsetofpodcasting.com, and on the right-hand side, you'll see a box to sign up to get your free copy of the podcast launch guide. You can start your podcast on your own, but it's always great to have a little help along the way. That's why I created this guide. Go to themindsetofpodcasting.com and get your copy today.